Good evening, everyone, or to be more accurate, good very early morning. Today it is Saturday, June 1st, 2024. Uh, and I'm up late. I'm a bit of a night owl, night hawk, put whatever label on it you want. Candy sleeps when she needs. She never sleeps when there's stuff going on, and certainly not when I'm doing video, because she has conditioned me that I am required. I often talk of it as if she's the Pavlovian dog. Well, I'm the Pavlovian dog. She has conditioned me that I have to give her a treat at the start of every video. Right. So I have complied. I'm a product of my conditioning. So shake a paw. Shake, give me a paw. Lay down. Speak. All right. I sometimes think the more I make her work for it, the happier she is to get it. But Candy has her munchie, and so now she'll leave me in peace to do my video. It is Pride, what is being called Pride Month in Canada. The month of June is designated as Pride Month. And if I'm not mistaken, I believe that the entire summer season is being designated as Pride season in this country. And when it comes to being, this progressive woke left ideology, I think Canada is pretty much the tip of the spear. If not the actual tip, we're darn close. And there's a meme floating around in social media circles, certainly among conservative types like myself. So I see this from like-minded friends, and it depicts a dam like Hoover Dam, large dam, and the river being held back is painted in the colors of the rainbow flag. The dam shows cracks, and then in the valley below, the town, in some of the memes, they've superimposed the word Canada, as if we're about to be flooded with this pride stuff. And I've given it some thoughts. I posted some of those thoughts to my Facebook page. I'm going to be sharing them now in video form. But Jordan Peterson recently has put out a short video. You can find it here on YouTube, where it's just a short minute or so long video of him talking about, so it's Pride Month. We're celebrating pride, that pride is one of the, cardinal sins or 7 deadly sins, and that we're celebrating it, and that people are redacting their identity down to their sexual preference, and we're celebrating this. This hedonism is live for today, there might not be tomorrow. It's almost the antithesis of Christianity. Christianity calls upon individuals to pick up their cross and to sacrifice, whereas hedonism says, forget the cross, forget sacrificing, live for the moment, there may not be a tomorrow. Club Med, which has resorts in places like the Caribbean, that's one of the names of their resorts. They have the resorts are called hedonism. That's rather than paradise or Melina Las Donas or whatever, they call theirs hedonism. We're a place to go to live for today. And to my mind, hedonism is the purvey, that is the domain of the enemy of God, of Satan. But in reflecting on this, I've been, how did we get here? How did we get to this point where identity is, your sexual preference determines your identity? And if you can watch that short little video by Jordan Peterson, many will have seen it, I'm sure. I'd encourage you, if you haven't seen it, to seek it out. But how did we get to this stage? And there's something from the Bible that many Christians will be familiar with, where Jesus exhorts his followers to, before you look at the speck in someone else's eye, to examine the log in your own eye. And before you criticize others, make sure your own house is in order, so to speak. And so I've been reflecting on, how did we get here? How did we get to this stage? And I think in terms of framing it in terms of popular culture, the media, and in particular television, I think that's an interesting way to look at. In the 1960s, we started to experience something that's generally referred to as the sexual revolution. The birth control pill was brought out, approved for use, which meant for the first time that sexual intercourse could take place without fear of pregnancy. It could be strictly for pleasure. I mean, sex has always been pleasurable. However, there was the potential consequence that a child might result from it. And so, for the benefit of the overall society, sex was kept under wraps. It was traditionally in Western culture, it was sex was something that was only to take place between a man and a woman in a consecrated marriage. Full stop, end of story. That is not to suggest that extramarital, premarital relations never took place. Of course they did. But the ethos of the broader culture was always that this is the ideal. This is what we're aiming toward. We may not achieve perfection, but we're aimed in that direction. And in terms of popular culture, when I look at a medium like television, which basically started in the 1950s, and if you watch TV shows in the 1950s and 1960s, sex was not a topic for content on any television shows. As a matter of fact, and I think I have this right, it was the Dick Van Dyke Show that was the first ever show to depict a double bed. If you watch the old I Love Lucy show with Lucille Ball and Desi Arnaz living in an apartment in New York, when they showed scenes in the bedroom, it was always twin beds. And I have read further that there was something of a rule in Hollywood or certainly on TV production studios, that if there was ever, when a scene took place in Ricky and Lucy's bedroom, that the characters, if they sat on the bed, at least, I believe both feet or at least 1 foot had to remain on the ground. You couldn't have anyone lying in bed. And again, it was always twin beds, single beds. And, sex was taboo. It wasn't talked about. You watch a show like Father Knows Best with Robert Young, and when the family gathered for a meal, they would actually say grace on the television. When's the last time you saw that in a TV show? Unless you're watching some Christian content, you're not going to see it. And then, this sexual revolution started to take place. And this is not to suggest that it didn't exist before. The Playboy magazine came out in the 1950s. Their first centerfold was Marilyn Monroe. And there were stag films around. Which would be the old projector that most of us will remember from, most of us old people will remember from school, from public school, high school, where they would show you a film and wheel in a projector and put the reels and 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, beep, 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 and you would watch a movie before VCRs became ubiquitous, another fancy word, before VCRs became prominent. And now, of course, everything is streaming. Everything is just online digital. But so this stuff existed, but it wasn't in the mainstream. You had to seek it out. It wasn't right in your face. When you turned on the TV and saw My Little Margie, Father Knows Best, I Love Lucy, Leave It to Beaver, these popular shows of the 50s and 60s, sex was left alone. There might a character might be romantically interested in another character. Wally Cleaver, the beaver's older brother, might have a romantic interest in a girl, but it was always, at most you might say perhaps a kiss, perhaps. But then we move into the 1970s and things have liberalized. And one of the shows that I remember well, because I was born in 66, so I became more of a sentient creature around 1970. I mean, your long-term memory starts to kick in sometime around 3-4 years of age. Certainly the case with me. I don't know what year the show debuted, but MASH was a incredibly popular show of the 1970s. And that show popularized, normalized sexual relations outside of marriage. Hawkeye was a womanizer. He had girlfriends all over the place, and he was the hero of the show. He was the star. You wanted to be like Hawkeye, like Alan Alda's character, Benjamin Franklin Pierce, and other characters on the show. Trapper John was married. I have TJ, I'm just going to say TJ, says that humor is a powerful tool, incredibly powerful tool. And even BJ had an extramarital affair in one episode. There was one episode where BJ played a character who was very grounded and was devoted to his wife, Peg. And then a nurse who had just broken up with her husband or had some romantic failing, and the two of them were very good friends, and they ended up in each other's arms. And it's the one time in the show where BJ, and he was wrought with guilt over it. But even before BJ came along, there was the CO, who was Henry Blake, played by McLean Stevenson. And he was regularly engaged in extramarital affairs. And I know the show well. I watched it, and I loved it, as a kid, not knowing what it was doing, not understanding the manner in which it was framing my worldview. I've seen TJ saying, "Holy moly, I missed that." Yeah, I've seen it. There might be an episode I missed, but not many. I could recite dialogue from some of the scenes. But anyway, Henry Blake, in one episode, he gets a letter from his wife telling him it's okay for you to fool around. Basically, that was the gist of the letter, saying, I know that we're separated and that, we've been apart for months and months or years, a year plus. And I know that you have needs, and basically, and he's like, I got to be the only guy in the army who's got to, cheat on your wife, letter from home, giving me the okay. And then he reflects on it and realizes that the reason she wrote that letter might have been, TJ calls it a free card. Yeah, I can't remember the exact way it was framed. And he then realized perhaps this was born out of a guilty conscience, and he ended up getting on the phone with his wife, and he found out that she was having an affair with an orthodontist. An orthodontist, and it was funny. This was funny, and it was celebrated. And I was a kid. That show, I think, started airing probably about 1974, somewhere in around there. And it ran right into the early 80s. I was born 66. So in 1974, I was 8 years of age, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12. It was on until I, entered high school around 1980. And young mind, impressionable mind. And this is in the, and television is passive entertainment. You just sit there. You don't interact with it. And it indoctrinates you. It programs you. And then we move into the 80s. And another top rated show was Cheers. And all of a sudden you had Sam Malone, former ball player, who slept with hundreds of women. In one episode, Diane, who is a young waitress at the bar and a real pain in the rear end, but very attractive. And they start getting romantically involved. And Diane asks Sam how many women he's been with, over the course of his lifetime. And Sam says, well, a few hundred. And she goes into shock, and he corrects himself and goes, a few honeys. That's all, just a few honeys. Maybe it's more than my share. And she's willing to accept that lie. And Sam is a venerated character. All the Norm and Cliff and all the guys at the bar, worship Sam Malone for his, this Lothario, betting women all over the place, and it's celebrated. And then, without going through too many more steps, I'll just bring it to 2.5 Men. I don't know when that show first came on the air. It would have been in the early 2000s, I think 2006, 7, 8, somewhere around there. TJ says about MASH, what fascinates him is that there are two versions, one with laugh track, one without. Yeah, most of it that I saw had the laugh track, and that he never got into Cheers. It was more obviously an immoral show. Appreciate you engaging with my content. I always enjoy it. There are other people watching, so if anyone else also wants to comment, please, the live chat is open. But so, you get to 2.5 Men, and now you have Charlie Parker, I think the name was. I watched the show. I did not get my feet back on the Christian path until I was around the age of 40, and it's a walk. There's a tendency, I think, for people for non-Christians to think that it's a lightning bolt, sudden transformation, born again, and that, but there's an evolution. Yes, Christians can believe in evolution. Our attitudes and our perception on things and our introspection on things evolves over time. When I was a kid growing up watching these shows of MASH and then Cheers, as probably started watching MASH around 8 or 9, and then was watching Cheers in high school, still just a young guy. I now have Cryptomeria saying, thank you, you are hilarious. I don't know what I'm hilarious about. And TJ says, no visions here either, sadly, but a few hints and synchronicities. Oh, yeah. And, this idea that there's a sudden transformation. When I talk about my Christian faith, I have to stress the point that I'm as fallen and as broken as any person can be. And I recognize my faults and my failings. And I know I'm still a long, long, long way from perfect. Oh, Cryptomeria likes my joke videos. Oh, I've been a joke teller all my life. Although I find my attitude toward humor is changing. I used to tell saucy jokes, for lack of a better word, and I stay away from those now. I do my best, but at any rate, so now we're at a situation now where we're about to celebrate Pride. There will likely, I imagine, in Toronto be a Pride parade. I have never been to one, but I know what goes on. I know the floats that they have. I know that there are some, I'm not saying it's all of it, but some parts of that parade, you'll have damn near nudity, public displays of nudity, men and women walking down the street wearing little or nothing at all, open displays of fetishes like BDSM, bestiality, things like that. And there are kids out watching this. There are kids sitting on the curb being exposed to this. And our culture is, we have none. We are not, we've become as decadent as is unbelievable. Actually, there is in New Orleans, their Pride celebration event. They have a week-long festival in that city, and it's called Southern Decadence. Club Med with their resorts called Hedonism. New Orleans with a Pride festival titled Southern Decadence. And this is all under the guy, and we're to be proud of it. I mean, if you go into scripture, it says that the ancient Israelites were constantly doing what was right in their own eyes. They were taking their eyes off of the truth, turning away from the gospel. And there has always been a gospel in my eyes. There has always been the good news of a loving Father reaching out to us and guiding us. And as it says in Jeremiah, and I can't remember the chapter and verse, but know that the plans that I have for you, plans to give you a hope and a future, plans for your well-being. That's the way I like to translate it. Some people say plans to prosper you. Some say plans for your welfare. Some people use it for this prosperity gospel, but that's another topic. Going to catch up. Cryptomeria is saying it's gone too far. Yes, it has. But this is where I get back to what I mentioned earlier. Jesus's exhortation to his followers to look at the log in your own eye before examining the speck in your neighbor's eye. And the broader culture, when it was Sam Malone, that was a top-rated show. MASH was a top-rated show. 2.5 Men, top-rated show. Even this Big Bang Theory with, Leonard, the character Leonard, sleeping around with various women is celebrated. He's the Mac Daddy. He's referred to, Sheldon refers to Leonard as the Mac Daddy of the four of them, of Raj and Howard, Leonard and Sheldon, and so in a fashion, I have to ask, while we're complaining about pride and the excess and this hedonistic decadence and celebrating immorality. Well, let's look at the log in our own eyes and understand that, oh, it was okay when it was heterosexual depravity being celebrated proudly on television and in countless media. Well, it's okay when it was heterosexual, but not when it's homosexual. That's hypocritical. That is highly hypocritical. I'm going to read what's being written. Crib Mary says it's gone too far. TJ says, I have friends that have fallen into this lifestyle. It all seems very fun at first, but there is a definite darkness in it. There is. It is ultimately, I'm going to say it. Some may want to argue with me, but I'm going to say it's satanic. There's a power, there's a force behind this, and it is not good. And one of the things I think we have to recognize, and it's difficult. It's difficult because it permeates our culture. Just go online. When I go into YouTube, I still get videos showing up on my feed, and I know they're clickbait, and it's a very attractive girl, young woman, in very, very scantily clad in a bikini, wearing a thong or things like that. And my 58 years notwithstanding, it's, it still impacts. It's still, whatever part of the brain, the stem of the brain, whatever part of the brain it is that reacts to that kind of thing. Yeah, it still fires in me. And it's still, wow. And that was something we used to be aware of. We were always aware of the fact that this, reaction happens if it's like waving a red flag in front of a bull. And so Hollywood and the TV production studios were responsible, and they kept that away from from primetime programming. TV was wholesome family entertainment. Now, it's one of the reasons since going back to 2010, I have not had, except for a brief period, but for the larger part of the last 14 years or so, there's been no television in my house. But we have streaming. I mean, I wouldn't be doing this video if we didn't have an internet connection. And so, when combating this and trying to bring people, I think it's important that when we talk about it, those of us who are inclined, like myself, to speak out against this, we also have to recognize and acknowledge openly that we're just as guilty ourselves too. And the other thought I had is that, we tend to progress in one direction or another. We move in one direction or another. Call it progression if you like. But we're either, things can get too restrictive, and then they can become too open. And it's only after things get to such a horrible state that there's a reaction and we start moving in the other direction. But the problem is when we get close to that healthy middle point, we don't stop there. We just keep moving until we go to the other extreme, where things are too restrictive. And I'm going to catch up. TJ says, I actually cut down TV a lot in 2000, and since 2006 and 7, I have not watched unless I was visiting friends. And that, this reaction to, this stimuli that we get either online, TV, wherever, it's hardwired into our brains. It bypasses logic. We don't think about it consciously. Great point, TJ. He goes on to say, one cannot escape media culture society. Unless you want to be a hermit, unless you want to go live in a cave somewhere like Elisha. And Christians, we are called to be in the world, but not of the world. And there's a tension there, because how can you be in the world, but not of the world? It is tough. And now the way the media, and in particular, and government officials, they frame it is that if you're opposed to any of this, well, then you're you're not loving, you're hateful, and you're not inclusive, you're exclusive. Inclusivity is good. Being accepting is good. Open is good. These are all good things. They're framed in that context. And so when we push back against it, oh, you're hateful, you're not inclusive, you're closed-minded, you're bad. We've exchanged truth for a lie. And hell in a handbasket. That's the direction in which we're heading. And another thought occurred to me on it, and it has to do with the whole WEF, Agenda 2030, this idea that this planet is overpopulated, and that 8 billion plus people is too many, and that we're consuming too many resources. And when you think about it, it's often presented, they'll say that the Western world makes up about 20% of the world's population, but we're consuming 80% of the world's resources. I've heard it said that, we make up a quarter, where I've heard it also said, we're 25% of the population eating 75% of the pie. And that this is not sustainable. And when you think about in Canada, our fertility rate, the number of births per woman of childbearing age, is 1.4 or 1.4 something, 1.41, 1.42. It's right around 1.4, meaning that women, on average, Canadian women give birth to 1.4 children. If a population is to maintain itself, not grow, not decline, just stay relatively steady, there needs to this fertility rate, not birth rate, that's different. The fertility rate needs to be 2.1. At 2.1, the population will remain pretty much constant. But because we're 1.4, our natural population growth is declining. So the only way a country like Canada can maintain and grow its population is through immigration. Only way. And immigration is a good thing. My ancestors, my parents and 3 of my 4 grandparents were born in Canada. So I guess I'm 3rd generation. Third. My 3 of my 4 grandparents were 1st generation. My parents were 2nd generation. So I guess I'm 3rd generation. I come from immigrant stock. And unless you're a native-born First Nations Canadian, we're all immigrants. And immigration is a good thing. The only problem now is that immigration, Canada just crossed 40 million within the last few months. We went over 40 million. We are a growing nation population-wise, but it's not natural growth. It's growth through immigration. And the immigrants coming into Canada are not coming to Canada from other Western developed nations by and large. We're bringing in people from countries like India, Philippines, the Islamic world, South America. We're bringing people in from countries where that fertility rate is over 2.1. Canada, Western Europe, the United States, the Western world contributes 0 to global population growth, absolutely 0. The only Western nation in the world with a fertility rate over 2.1 is Israel. Everywhere else in the Western developed world, Without immigration, our populations would be in decline, and we'd have big trouble because we have an aging population. And when you have an aging population, when you have a lot of people getting old, you need younger people in behind them because once people get into their 60s, 70s, 80s, they're rarely contributing members to a nation's economy. So you need the young people. I got to catch up. TJ on my comment talks about the pendulum I was referring to. You know, it starts swinging one way, it goes to an extreme, and then it starts going the other way until it hits the extreme. And it says food, money, health, so many things. Sheriff of YouTube says, we got another person chiming in. This is great. Really appreciate it. TJ, Cryptomeria, and Sheriff of YouTube. I am not celebrating sexual deviance as a society because I want what is best for those after me. But part of that is, you know, a lot of people will talk about and say, I'm not doing it for myself. I'm doing it for my kids. I'm doing it for my grandkids. If you're part of the LGBTQXMLMNOB, the endless acronym community, the fertility rate Canada-wide is 1.4. But for the lesbian, gay, bisexual, trans, queer community, promise you, the fertility rate is significantly lower. I don't think it's zero. I think there is the odd lesbian who engages in sexual congress with a man, you know, LGB, bisexual. So some go both ways, and so I'm sure they're having some kids. It's a very small number. They don't contribute, you know, it's not even 1.4. And if a society is going to sustain itself and maintain its culture and its values and its identity, you need natural growth, not growth through immigration. Because when you have growth through if you want to know what happens when immigrants overwhelm a society, talk to the First Nations people of Canada. Talk to the Cree, the Ojibwe, the Haida, the Inuit, the Mi'kmaq, and the various First Nations in Canada. They were overwhelmed. Their culture, their identity, their values were steamrolled. And we are witnessing the same thing. It's not going to happen in the weeks or months ahead, but in the years ahead, it is going to happen. And here's where a really interesting, another fancy word, dichotomy comes in. Something of a paradox is the fact that through being so open and inclusive, we're sowing the seeds of our own demise. And the cultures that are coming into Canada, especially from the Islamic world, this concept of openness and inclusiveness and celebrating things like Pride. Do you really think they celebrate Pride in Iran or Iraq or Saudi Arabia or Egypt? If you're openly gay in an Islamic country, you're going to get thrown off a building. And that's just reality. When there was I forget what it was called. I think it was called the Million Person March or something like that. And it was opposing this transgender indoctrination that's taking place in our schools. It was actually spearheaded by Muslims. And a lot of Christians joined in because on this issue, we're joined. You know, we have huge differences in other areas, but at least in terms of protecting our children from this woke left-wing Marxist ideology that seeks to subdivide humanity and you know, whatever difference can be found. In this respect, Muslims and Christians have common ground. I'm going to keep reading. TJ says they call it the Great Replacement. It is erasing Western kind. And Sheriff of YouTube says, we are not all immigrants. I am born here. You know, in our national anthem, oh, Canada, my home and native land. And I've openly wondered, speculated, questioned at what point, how many generations does it take? Even the First Nations, if you believe the popular anthropological origin stories of the First Nation peoples in North America, it's that they came from Asia across a land bridge across the Bering Strait and populated the Americas. So even, but after how many generations do you become native? Sheriff of YouTube then goes on to say populations grow according to its values. And TJ was talking about, they call it the Great Replacement. It is erasing Western kind. I mentioned that, yeah. The way I've often framed it is that the ultimate objective of this Great Reset, Agenda 2030, Club of Rome, put whatever label on it you want, is basically to depopulate Western developed nations, to backfill the populations with peoples coming from countries like India, Pakistan, Philippines, and African nations. Often the individuals coming into Canada from these countries, these are often highly educated people. However, they don't have the same value structure, and they don't have the same expectations vis-a-vis human rights, liberty, and things of that nature. For someone coming from rural India, clean water and sanitation is a luxury. Oh my gosh. And this notion of human rights and such, if you come from an Islamic theocracy like Iran with its Sharia law, what are your expectations about openness and inclusiveness? Is it that big a deal to you? I would argue that's not. They're not coming here for our values. They're coming for the quality of life. And the quality of life is superior. And so they come in, and because Canada, nations like Canada, we grant citizenship to immigrant populations. And with citizenships comes the right to vote in elections. And then it's at the ballot box that you can then push ideological, cultural agendas and open things up for your worldview. And for again, it's an example. Look at what happened to Canada's First Nations people, the Ojibwe, Cree, and all the rest. Look what happened to their culture and their values and their system of living. It was steamrolled. Ours is going to be steamrolled too. TJ says it's because the economy is a pyramid scheme, is my guess. Okay. Sheriff of YouTube to deport all illegal immigrants and scab workers, let them immigrate legally and with their own money. Thing is, Canada's immigration policy has become so liberalized. I don't think it's an open border. Like, they're not entering illegally, they're being allowed in. We had this Roxham crossing somewhere in Quebec, where I think it was upstate New York, and there was this basically people coming across, just walking across with their suitcases. But I don't think that's there was talk in 2023, a 3-month quarterly period. I think it was June, July, August. For that 3-month period, Canada allowed 400,000 immigrants into the country. That's just over 3 months. On an annualized basis, that would be 1.6 million. That's larger than some provinces. That's larger than provinces like Manitoba, Saskatchewan, Nova Scotia, New Brunswick, Newfoundland, PEI. We're on an annual basis adding a province to Canada. And immigration, if managed well, can be a wonderful benefit to a country, so long as it's not overwhelming. The People's Party of Canada, Maxime Bernier, I don't think he invented the term. I think it likely started in Europe, but the term he's popularized in Canada is mass immigration. And he has said we need to stop mass immigration. It's not that we need to stop immigration. Our birth rate, and our fertility rates are so low that without immigration, then we would face other challenges, like who's going to be working to keep the economy rolling while so many are living out their final days in nursing homes and long-term care facilities. You need young people. And we get into this whole LGBTQ thing, and especially this transgender crap where kids are being put on puberty blockers and being given, radical mutilating surgeries, hacking off healthy breast tissue, and the whole 9 yards, what they call the full transition. They talk about top and bottom now. Well, you get that bottom work done. Well, reproduction is gone. You have no life beyond your own. Hedonism. There's nothing for the future. And it's a sad world we're living in. I mean, it's funny. Someone commented, Crimea, about liking my jokes. And, part of the reason for that is, why I tell jokes is, in a world going crazy, sometimes you need to lighten the mood somewhat. Going on. Just reading on. Sheriff says, technically, lesbians could have 6 kids every 3 years and save our country from being self-dissolved. I made that point earlier that, I don't, among the LGBTQ community, the birth rate isn't 0. The fertility rate isn't 0. Lesbians, bisexual, they do have kids, seldom. And now, of course, we have basically what amounts to abortion on demand in Canada. You can get an abortion at any time and for any reason without any restrictions in this country. A child does not have any legal standing in Canada until the child has fully emerged from the womb and alive. Late-term abortions do happen in this country. And there are only a few countries in the world that have the same laws as Canada. And 2 of them, one is China and the other one's North Korea. There might be others, but we're in some great company there. China, North Korea, and Canada. I think actually that we may be the only 3 countries where an abortion can be performed at any time and for any reason. Don't like the gender of the child that you're going to have? Because there's still a bias among a lot of people, and specifically the Canadian Medical Association wrote a paper on this in the Journal of the Canadian Medical Association, is the fact that Asian communities demonstrated a statistical bias toward male children. The data revealed that there were more boys being born within certain communities, one being particular Asian communities, Chinese and others, where culturally male children have always been preferred to female children. And they did a study and they found out that, it shows up in the data, especially when it's a second child after a girl has already been born. If you have a girl the first time, what are your chances of having a girl the second time? 50-50. It's like that old bromide of you flip a coin and 9 times in a row, it comes up heads. On that 10th flip, what are the chances it'll come up heads again? 50-50. So you can look into that. There's a study out there on that. And so sex selection abortion, according to the Canadian Medical Association, absolutely takes place. And it's predominantly female fetuses being aborted because people want a boy. And we allow it in this country for any reason at any time. And it's destroying us. And I honestly, I think we've gone so far. We've crossed the Rubicon. Things have gone too far. And at this point, I don't think there's any pulling back. And that, I think it's just reality. And one, I labeled this something about a Christian take on things. And I'm not saying I speak for all Christians. Just, I profess Jesus Christ as my Lord and Savior. And so these are my opinions. And now I forgot, in putting that disclaimer, I forgot what I was going to say. That we've gone too far, that there's no going back. And so, here's what I was going to say is, one attitude might be, well, there's nothing I can do about it. You can't fight it. And why be miserable? So why not just go along with it? Why not just be at peace with it rather than shaking your fist at the cloud? Well, that's where my Christian perspective comes in. I do believe that when things are like this, we are to be that voice, even if things are horrible, even if, if you're the ancient Israelites and the Assyrians are attacking and they're going to take over, or the Babylonians are going to come and carry you away in exile, you still speak the truth. Even though you know that eventuality is coming, you still speak the truth. And anyway, Sheriff says, Sharunian is here, Sharunian Allegiance. Gordon, YouTube removed and banned me from commenting for a couple days over a video. Not surprised it has happened to me too. It hasn't happened for a while, and I'm amazed at it. There's another commenter, Thomas, I think is his name. His username is Sojourner Didymus, and he put out a video, or he put a comment on one of my videos, and he introduced me to something I wasn't familiar with. At least I have encountered it, but I didn't know what I was encountering, and it's called pre-bunking. That I may do a video on that in the days ahead. What is pre-bunking? And it applies to everything. Pre-bunking. It's the idea of the purveyors of all these agendas pushing pride and LGBTQ and pushing climate change and pushing bird flu or COVID or pushing whatever disinformation campaign they have in store for us. They now have this concept of pre-bunking, where what they can do is they can anticipate the objections that critical thinkers will have to their propaganda. And they can get out in front of it and pre-bunk it so that their lies hold prominence. So that probably do a video on that in a day or two. I've just read an article on it, on pre-bunking, that was put out by the University of Cambridge, one of the most world-renowned, probably, when people talk about universities, Cambridge and Oxford in the United States, Yale and Harvard, and in the Cambridge and Oxford are England, Yale and Harvard are the United States. Canada, maybe have McGill would be one, maybe University of Toronto or Queen's is another. So it's Cambridge University in tandem with Google and the BBC working together on how to sell propaganda and how to get out in front of objections to it and to pre-bunk it so that your propaganda goes the reaches even further. That'll be my video next time. But it ties into what I'm talking about now, about this whole LGBTQ XMNOP garbage. But the log in our own eye. When talking out against this, we also have to recognize that the amount of pornography, heterosexual pornography, straight pornography, is pandemic level. Think in that sense, that's more of a pandemic than COVID ever was. Just going to read the last comments. Oh, there's a whole bunch. Now I got Wesley Curry. I wasn't scrolling down. Sheriff says, do you really think Jesus celebrated Pride? No, I do not. A man leaves his mother and cleaves to his wife, and they become one flesh. No, Jesus did not celebrate Pride. TJ says there are many peoples that have been totally erased. No one can tell their story now. White people, historically, I prefer the term Western European, just because I know that if you stick the word white, people go racist. Oh, okay, Western European or whatever. Usually do not erase entire populations totally. So there are still witnesses. When Spain went into countries, they were brutal. The Spanish, which is Western Europe, they were brutal. In places like Cuba, there are places where entire native populations were basically wiped out. And if you look in the United States, and if you look at the Trail of Tears, Andrew Jackson, it was called the Indian Removal Act, and it forced millions of one of the tribes was the Cherokee, and they had to endure privations of horrible, had to march by foot hundreds, if not 1,000 or more miles, with people dying. Unfortunately, the default position of humanity is we're all fallen and we're all broken. And I don't think that Western European white humans are any better or worse than any other population. That's a topic for another video. TJ says, not so much about generations. I think it's about numerical advantage, and I agree. If a population that has the capacity to subjugate another population will, regardless of how much melanin is in their skin. It's what we do to each other. I talked about in an earlier video, we're tribal in nature. And if my tribe is more numerous than another tribe, my tribe will subjugate that other tribe, but that other tribe will subjugate me and my tribe if they're greater in number. History is a tale of numbers. Sharunian, there's theories that Native Americans are black. Hadn't heard that one, but it's possible. At the end of the day, doesn't matter to me how much melanin, what a person's skin tone is. Judge the individual, don't judge the book, not the cover. Wesley Curry says, hi. And you imagine that you are a Christian. I profess myself to be a Christian. Far from the truth are you? Sounds like Yoda. Far from the truth are you? All of you who saw Jesus and heard Jesus say, tell the vision. All of you who deny that are Satan worshipers. Okay, you're losing me a bit. Calling yourself a Christian is merely a fashion and vanity for you. Okay. Uh, you're sitting in judgment on me. I'm a fallen, broken person who proclaims uh, Christ as Lord and Savior, who recognizes Jesus' atoning sacrifice on the cross. And it's only by that that a fallen, broken, miserable creature like me can be reconciled to God. That's my only hope. Wesley says, Jesus told you you are not a Christian when he said to you, no time to talk Allah, and you want war. I'm curious, Wesley, genuine question, is English your first language? Just your syntax seems, and I speak French, and I know that it's not my first language. And when you communicate in a language that's not your first language, things like syntax and grammar get messed up. My French grammar and syntax can be horrible. Allah, from my understanding, that is the Arabic word for God. The French word for God is Dieu. Do French people believe in God because they call God Dieu? Let's go on. And Wesley says, goodbye. Your toy TV show, your vomit, lies, corruption, and dead words. Fair enough. Bye, Wesley. TJ, Western kind also did a lot of atrocities to its own kind, sadly. Oh, yeah. Look into something called Bacon's Rebellion that happened in the Virginia colony. When it comes to the ruling elites, I don't think they give a rat's rosy rear end about, color themselves, as long as they're on top. Sheriff of YouTube says, Yoda, smile. I blocked Wesley. I hope he blocks me. I don't think I've ever seen that guy before, but I don't care. Just a troll. And it's a sign of some success, the way I look at it. I haven't had many trolls yet. So maybe I'm going to start to get some now. Fair enough. It's going to happen. TJ says, I wish I knew French. I lived in Quebec 2011 until 2015. So, je parle français. C'est ma deuxième langue. Je suis assez bien confortable. I'm pretty much comfortable jazzing away in French. Jaser. That's instead of parler in Quebec, they say jaser. On va jaser. We're going to talk. TJ says, Father God Abbas, sometimes I believe. Father God Abba, sometimes I believe. Holy moly. Sheriff of YouTube, we call Frenchies peppers in Quebec. Okay. Are you in Quebec, Sheriff of YouTube? I lived in Quebec City, Val-Belair, right next to Valcartier, where I was posted when I was in the Army. Hey, Sheriff of YouTube says, je parle bien en franglais. Et ça, c'est comme moi. Parfois, quand je ne sais pas un mot, ma vocabulaire, ça manque. When I don't know a word, je laisse tomber le mot anglais. I just drop in the English word. If you go to New Brunswick in Canada, I'm going off tangent now. If you go to New Brunswick in Canada, they speak franglais. Jette ton stuff dans mon car, on va driver sur la road. It's that kind of French. TJ says, was Yoda a troll? Haha, I guess he was a troll wizard. Sharunian says, what's your thoughts on women wearing headscarves, Gordon? A scarf? I work with a woman just recently employed with us who's Jewish, which in this little town, Brighton, Ontario, 15 not even 15,000 people. She's probably there's no synagogue in Brighton. She is probably the Jewish community, and she covers her head, and she does it out of religious observance. She does it because I would say she's probably conservative Jewish, not Orthodox, but conservative. Someone like, it's the guys, men, if they're conservative, if they're observant Jews, conservative observant Jews, they'll wear the yarmulke, the cap, or sometimes called a kippah. I grew up in New Jersey. I got to learn a lot of this stuff. What are my thoughts on women wearing headscarves? I don't like the idea of mandating a dress code. And if a woman wants to wear, I think it's called the hijab, where, the face is, or the head is covered. If it's a choice, I mean, the difficulty is that we know that there are women who wear it because out of a sense that they're required to. There have been stories about girls who are from Muslim households who have the expectation to wear the hijab or the niqab, and then they, once they get out of the house and they get to school, then they take it off. And there have been press reports about girls being, attacked by members of their family over removing their head covering. And I think that anytime something like that happens, this is where I talk about our value system is being overhauled. It's being overwhelmed. This would not be an issue if Canada was still a nation that recognized its Christian foundations and its Christian heritage. This would not be a debate. If in the House of Commons in Queen's Park, they used to open with prayer. We used to start every school day with Our Father who art in heaven, hallowed be thy name, every day. We don't have that anymore. We're tearing away the foundation of our society. And we call it being open and inclusive. And what we're doing is we're steamrolling ourselves. Sheriff of YouTube is Montrealais, so Montrealer. I would guess West Island, given that you say franglais. TJ says, I speak Fringlish. I think it means, yeah. Sharunian says, a woman by the name of Angela Simpson wrote a letter from prison. She scares me, and look her up. Okay. Angela Simpson. Okay. I mean, this world is going crazy. There's something for me to read. TJ says, kippah is the name I know. This is something I found surprising. Kippah is the proper Hebrew word. I asked the woman with whom I work. I said, I know the two terms. I know yarmulke and I know kippah. I said, which is the Yiddish word and which is the Hebrew word? And I thought, yarmulke, that to me sounds more Hebrew, sounds more Semitic. But apparently yarmulke is the more popular term, but it's actually Yiddish. Kippah is the proper Hebrew term for that, the like you see Ben Shapiro wearing. Yeah, it shouldn't be, I think you're talking about dress code. The dress code shouldn't be an issue for us, but it is. And then, of course, there is the burqa. And that's insane. That is insane. The burqa, I have no problem. There are the Amish communities, Amish women, Mennonite. I know one of those two, and maybe both, the women will always wear a bonnet. They always cover their head. Are we going to have a law telling the Amish and the Mennonite that they're not allowed to wear their little bonnet? They also always wear long flowing dresses that go right down to the ankle, cover the ankle, you know, and they dress very modestly. Are we going to ban that? I mean, I'm not comfortable with this idea of dress codes. And if you impose it on one population, you have to do it to others. So, TJ says, interesting. I like religion. Sharunian said, there's a lot of good Muslims who condemn other Muslim extremists for anti-LGBTQ views. Getting it back, and I'm going to wrap it up because I've gone over an hour and 10 minutes now. And I crashed out a while earlier, but I need to get a few more hours sleep. Look at the log in our own eyes. Before criticizing this pride and this LGBTQ stuff, and I do think it is insane. But getting back to what I said at the beginning, with our own celebration of hedonistic heterosexual lifestyle. Well, what's good for the goose is good for the gander. If heterosexuals can celebrate their lustful, sinful, prideful life, why can't others do the same? And both are equally bad. And have we gone too far to bring things back? Can we stop the pendulum from going even further? And can we start to push it back in the other direction? Maybe. I tend to think we've gone too far. I think things have gotten too far. But just reading on. Yes, TJ, before looking at your neighbor's splinter, look at the log in your own eye before the speck in your neighbor's eye. There's a tendency to blow up the sins of another group or another individual and to minimize our own. Well, it's okay if it's heterosexual, but if it's homosexual, then it's bad. The world is going crazy. TJ, I'm Swedish, so translations sometimes falter. I don't know any Swedish. But 10 million, I think your population is in and around 10 million. French is all I got, and a little bit of German. Ich spreche kleiner bisschen Deutsche. Sheriff of YouTube, yeah. Sheriff of YouTube, he crashed out from 6 until 10. And so, yeah, that should do it. Thank you for watching, everyone. Thanks for engaging with me. I wanted to get those thoughts out there. I am going to do another video in another night or two, probably Sunday night. Smorgasbord. Yes, I knew smorgasbord is Swedish. And Yuletide. I didn't know Yuletide was. Thought that was more German. But anyway. Sheriff for YouTube says, I like Sanity for Sweden channel. I don't know that one. I really admired Sweden's response to the pandemic. I thought they were the only country in the Western developed world that kept its head and said, all right, we'll pay lip service to this insanity, but we're not going full in on it. The restaurants, bars, things can stay open, but everyone take a seat. Everyone has to be seated. Schools for the elementary age kids, we're keeping them open because we have healthcare workers who have children and they need somewhere to send their kids during the day so that they can work. If our hospitals are going to be overwhelmed, we need our healthcare professionals, and a lot of them are parents. I think Sweden was the one country in the Western developed world that kept its head and didn't go. I still think they went too far, but nowhere near what the rest of us did. I think they had a restriction in Sweden where outdoor public gatherings were restricted to 50 people. In Canada, outdoor public gatherings were restricted at times to like 5, unless there was a protest like George Floyd, and then all of a sudden hundreds and thousands could gather. It was nuts. I don't know what the interesting story was. Yeah, the whole world did try the vaccine passport. And this, I think I'm going to get on to heavily when I do my next talk about this pre-bunking. And they were already doing it. I encountered it, except I didn't realize or I didn't know, I hadn't heard this term pre-bunking until Thomas Sojourner Didymus brought it up to me in a comment on another video. My voice is starting to rang out here. It's starting to get raspy. Sweden would never have been able to handle the 50 no-go zones, so they could do nothing. Anyway, that's the end of my video. Thanks very much, everyone. You're helping keep my sanity in this crazy world. Sharunian sent me an email. Okay, I'll try and reply. What address did you send it to? Canadian Soapbox or English Frog? I'll check both, but I am hardly GQ. You send it to Soapbox. Okay, I will check it. That's on Gmail. All right. God bless everyone. And I had a few thoughts rattling around in my head for a video tonight. One was pride, one was about pre-bunking, and the other one was on defining what it means to be a Christian. What exactly does it mean? I'm a Christian. Everyone says that. And I'm going to do a video at some point explaining what I believe, scripturally based, what it means to be a Christian. And TJ says, God bless. Let's all work together for the well-being of Western kind. Let's advance God's kingdom. Not Western, it's not Eastern, it's not anything. It's God's kingdom. And it's not ours, it's His. Anyway. Oh, Sheriff of YouTube, you're... profanity alert. Sheriff of YouTube, and don't take offense, but you're a shit disturber. Which is okay. We need them. Anyway, Sharunian says, love you all. Good morning. Likewise, and even Wesley Yoda, love you too, man. And if you ever want to come back and want to have genuine conversation, you're welcome on. I'm not going to ban anyone. If someone wants to troll me, troll away. I got big shoulders. Anyway, God bless, and we'll talk to y'all later. Good night. Oh, and the last thing, as always, subscribe. You know the drill. Good night, all. And